Hi, everyone, and welcome to Christianity Now, the podcast where we're so nice we record it thrice. This is our third attempt at a podcast recording with these guests today. We've had some technological difficulties, but we're excited to sit down today and talk about pastors in the classroom. My name's Josh Ziefel, and I'm the Dean of the College of Ministry at Northwest. And with me today are three of our pastors who will be teaching for us at Northwest University in our undergraduate ministry program in the fall. First up, we have Dr. Beth Backes, pastor of the Table Church in Federal Way. Hi, Beth.
Hey, good to be with you.
Yeah, glad to have you. Next up, we have Dr. Brandon Beals, co-founder and lead pastor of Venture Church in Mill Creek, Washington, and he's recording in his weight room, so I think he wanted to show that off to all of us. Hi, Brandon. Okay, good. And third with us is Dr. Alan Ehler, who is a former professor here at Northwest, former dean at Southeastern University, occupying a role similar to mine, and currently lead pastor of Neighborhood Church in Bellevue. Welcome, Alan.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, we're excited to have the three of you here because the three of you are taking part in a grand experiment here at Northwest University, and one that I'm excited about, where we are bringing in three highly educated, actively serving pastors, local pastors, into our classroom to teach, to mentor, and to invest into our College of Ministry students this coming fall. And hopefully beyond is the plan. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. First of all, though, an opening question that I ask all of my guests is this, comes to us from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and it's a question. It's this question. I'd like all of you to take a shot at it. The question is this: who is Jesus Christ for us today? Why don't we start with you, Beth?
I believe that Jesus truly is a friend that gives us help for today and hope for tomorrow. We could talk a lot about the Christology of Jesus, but in the end, Jesus called his disciples friends. So that's who he is to me.
Okay. Thank you, Beth. Brandon, how about you?
One of the things we talk about a ton at Venture is we always say that Jesus is the hero of the story. And so that's what I would say. We live in a culture, especially when it comes to college students, Gen Z. This is a generation that is looking for heroes. And as we've seen, when they find heroes in the media, even when they find ministers that are heroes, all we are is men and women who fail. And Jesus needs to be the hero. And that's what I think. So that's what I think Jesus is today. He is the hero. He's always been the hero. He will always continue to be the hero. And he's who we need to make famous.
Okay. Thanks, Brandon. Alan.
Yeah, absolute. Both are completely true. But I think, as tradition would say, Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior. He's the only way we can be saved, and he is Lord of the universe. That means he is the ruler of all, and there is no other way given among people by which we can be saved. And so that's why sharing that good news is the critical mission of the church now and always until he returns.
All right. Well, three good answers. You guys passed the test, so congratulations there on that. I like to ask the question in some sense. I mean, in some ways, the answer is. I mean, we don't want to create new wacky answers that have no sense, but I think there's a way in which the way that Jesus interacts with us in the here and now, the same Jesus who is the same yesterday and today and forever, comes to us in our moment of need that are sometimes is very uniquely conditioned by the conditions of the present. I remember driving back and forth to college, and there was this farmer or whatever who had in his field or some church had put up a sign and it said, "Jesus is the answer," which of course we would affirm. But then the secondary thing you wonder is, well, what is the question to which Jesus is the answer? And everybody has different questions, different points in their life, and sometimes societies or cultures or the conditions of the present age mean that people are asking new and different questions, and Jesus is the answer. But yeah, starts in a different place. Okay, enough of me preaching. So as I said, you three are part of this exciting new product placement venture at Northwest University to bring consistently and regularly highly qualified pastors into the classroom to teach undergraduate students. I met with each of you, and we talked about this earlier this spring to kind of bring you on board. And we're still figuring out some of what this relationship might look like. And this is a pilot program this fall. But each of the three of you agreed to do this. You agreed to teach ministry courses here at Northwest this fall. And if it works out well, potentially moving forward, why did you do that? What interests you about teaching ministry students right now at this point in the ministry God's given you and at this point in your career? So during our conversation, I'll probably call on a few people to start off, but then if others would like to speak up, feel free to do so. So Alan, why don't you lead us off? Why did you say yes to this request?
Sure. Well, I've loved teaching, taught full-time 15 years, started as an adjunct at Northwest when I was pastoring north of Seattle. And it really found that it was part of my calling, but I never lost the pastoral calling too. So I have absolutely loved getting back in the church now 10 months after leaving full-time higher ed. But even when we did this, Kira said, we can say yes to the church. My wife, she said, as long as you don't stop teaching. And so this gave that opportunity, and we have loved it, loved getting connected with the Northwest University students who attend our church and serve and intern, and love that we'll be able to do this. It's a passion. It's part of the calling.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. I am who I am today because of the professors that invested in me 30 some years ago when I was first studying for ministry. I still remember significant conversations that I apply today in ministry. And so just on a personal note, I want to be that for the next generation of ministry leaders. 5 of my paid staff are graduates from NU. And
Right.
I love this next generation. I believe that they are truly the world changers in the church today. So I'm excited for that.
Cool.
Yeah, I'd say for me, really two major reasons. Number one, just to reiterate what Beth said, that I really feel a calling to minister to the next generation and to help raise up the next generation of leaders. And so this is just part of the passion. It's part of why I carved away a really major chunk of my weekly schedule to be able to invest in the next generation of leaders. So that is first and foremost. But secondly, I'm really personally committed to the success of Northwest. I believe having actual practitioners that aren't just ministers that are educated to have the educational credentials to teach, but are really successful ministers. I think it's going to be proven invaluable for NU, and the Northwest needs Northwest University. The Seattle area needs Northwest, and so I would say that's my second reason is that I want to do whatever I can to help my alma mater succeed. By the way, total side note, you get me on a podcast, you're going to get me doing stuff like this, Josh. You asked for it. In the recent issue of Northwest Passage, they talked about my wife and I, but they listed her as an alumni and not me. And I graduated from Northwest before my wife. So, there you go.
Well, sorry.
I am an alumni of Northwest and 2 other places. But
he did graduate, folks. He did graduate.
Yes.
I realized I skipped over something, and this actually sets up another question in a minute. But one of the things that is kind of fun for me, and I think it's going to be fun for our students, is, first of all, each of the 3 of you are different people, but each of the 3 of you, I think, are ministering in 3 very different and distinct contexts and types of churches. So starting with Beth and Brandon, then Alan, could you tell us each a little bit about your church and kind of the context in which you're ministering?
Yeah, I just planted the table in Federal Way. It's a unique community with 135 different nationalities represented. The Federal Way school system is the most ethnically diverse in the whole state and number 5 in the nation. And so we are really reaching the nations. It feels like the mission field at our doorstep. When you come into one of our church services, you get people from all around the world represented. So it's a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks, Beth. Brandon.
Yeah, I lead a church that my wife and I started 20 years ago. So we're still at the same church that we planted. Over those 20 years, the church has grown into one of the largest churches in the state. We have 7 campuses. And so I think the perspective that my wife and I bring is we come with the church planner perspective, like Beth, but we also come with we've kind of navigated our way through every growth barrier that you experience as a church, because oftentimes guys or gals transition when they face various growth barriers, but we have kind of evolved our leadership, adjusted the way our team operates things multiple times over these last 20 years. And so I think that provides a unique perspective. Also, our church is 20 minutes north of Seattle, so we're really influenced by the culture of Seattle a lot there, similar to the way I would say probably Alan's church is, and Beth's church too. Yeah, I think that provides a really unique perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Alan.
Yeah, well, in contrast to both Beth and Brandon, our church is almost 100 years old and been in Bellevue in that time period. A couple sweet ladies got filled with the Holy Spirit and said we need new expression of faith. They joined the assemblies very early in the 1930s and moved to our current property in 1959. And the church has had a huge impact, always been close to Northwest, always had a tight relationship. Everywhere I go, I'll meet pastors and missionaries who attended Neighborhood while they were students at Northwest. So we've been able to have a huge influence, but we're also a classic turnaround church whose greatest attendance was over 40 years ago and has had some interesting seasons. And also interesting for me because I started vocational ministry here a long time ago as an associate pastor doing evangelism, then later youth ministry. And so it's been fun to come back. And yet, like Beth described Federal Way, Bellevue is also very multinational. Our church represents that. And it's so fun to have a board that represents 3 continents in leadership. And that in spite of a wide range of ethnic backgrounds and really financial situations, it is a loving community, a genuinely loving community is the words that we use to describe who we are as we seek to communicate the gospel of Jesus. And in our city that has so many multinational corporations headquartered here, like T-Mobile headquarters, Amazon is just moving into Bellevue, Microsoft is less than 3 miles from us, and those are just a few of many. So it's an exciting and yet challenging opportunity, but we are excited to be here.
Yeah. One other thing I should mention, Brandon mentioned his wife, Pastor Beals, also co-founder and I think discipleship pastor at Venture Church. She is also co-teaching and has for the last 2 years preaching with Brandon. So she's not with us today, but she'll also be in the classroom this fall and Lord willing beyond teaching. So obviously you bring your unique context to the table when you're teaching courses, but beyond that, what would you say when you come into the classroom? What do you bring to the table, or what do you plan on bringing to the table in your courses, being who you are with the kind of experience and the kind of personality and giftings you have?
I think, looking at the dynamic of the 3 of us, you guys have done a really good job. All 3 of us, I would say we're friends, but we're all very uniquely different. Our styles of ministry are uniquely different, and all 3 of us are very strong, have very strong opinions. And so I would say what you're going to get is you're going to get me in particular encouraging the students to be themselves. That I would say when I graduated from Northwest back in the early 90s, there was this cookie cutter look that a pastor was supposed to have. Supposed to talk a certain way, act a certain way, fit a certain demographic. And I just knew the whole time, I was like, my paradigm is different. I got saved from the world. I have not been going to church very long. I don't know the terminology. I was just different. And what I think you're going to get from us is we're going to teach them to be comfortable in their skin, to not question the fact that God called them into ministry, the person that they are, and how God can use their unique skills, strengths, giftings, personality, and I would say experiences to really shape their ministry. And their ministry might not look like even their professor's ministry or the churches that they interns ministry, but that's not a bad thing. You have to be true to who God has called you to do. And I would say, I think that's really important specifically, like I've always joked that the Assemblies of God, we're the copying um, denomination. Like when somebody does something really cool, we read their books, we go to all their seminars, and we try to create churches exactly like that. But a pendulum really swung, I would say, in the last 5 to 10 years, where we're just kind of letting people be themselves. And I think that is really the key, that
Hmm.
successful church in the future is people understanding that God didn't mess up when he made you who you are. And I mean, that is going to be a lot of what the students are going to hear from me in the preaching class and the ministry leadership class that I'm teaching.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's so good,
Alan,
Brandon.
okay.
I would say on the same line, the experience that we're going to bring is teaching from the front lines. I think all of
Hmm.
us can relate to having professors that tell stories from like 30 years ago. I had that experience, not at Northwest University, but at a different university. And there was a cultural disconnect. And so I think what I'm going to bring to the table in the classroom is not stories from 25 or 30 years ago, but stories from last week and stories from the front lines of how do we minister in the world today, in the complexities, how to
Hmm.
think with adaptive mindsets and adaptive leadership, because a lot of what we see and what I learned was very much cookie cutter. So that's what we're going to be talking about in my classes.
Yeah, those are good words, Beth. It's been good for me to come back after 15 years in
Hmm.
full-time higher ed. I was always active in the church and roles and even consulting and things, but when it's on your shoulders, it's different. And I think hopefully I can bring those 1,800 students that I've taught over the years, and so many of them still reach out. And even this week, I've had 3 different students who've reached out and requested in one way or another, whether advice or support or reference, recommendation. But I see the value of what Northwest is doing is so many schools have gone to alternative forms of education and delivery. You can get the content anywhere. You can watch a YouTube video, you can read a book, but there's something about relationship that is priceless. And as we are there on the ground, we are still with students, and we're going to have offices that Josh is making available. We can go for coffee. We can mentor. We can connect you. I get to teach the internship class to be sure that students are placed in a place where they can actually do ministry with somebody who's going to come alongside them and
Yeah.
help them and coach them to be able to do it and give that encouragement that just watching a video isn't going to be able to give you.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the questions I have is, I mean, obviously, none of us are college age right now, or that moment in our life, that 18 to 22-year-old is well behind us. But the people in your classrooms, by and large, there will be some people outside of that age range, but generally speaking, you're going to be between, say, 18 and 23, 18 and 24. That will be the generation in your undergraduate classroom. So when you think about the ministry training you received, and you've talked about this a little bit, and the training that those currently 18 to 22 need, how is it the same and how is it different? How does that training look the same? And what are some things that is going to have to be different for them? Brandon, you would comment a few comments on this before. Would you like to carry that on?
Yeah, I would say, and this is the thing that I always tell everybody, is that, and I'll teach this in the ministry leadership class,
Mm-hmm.
that every church functions with similar systems. We all have a service planning system, an assimilation system, an evangelism system, whatever you choose to call it. It's all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Those strategies are pretty much have been the same for decades. And things that you did years ago, those things still work today.
Mm-hmm.
But so strategies and systems for church are kind of more or less timeless. But I would say understanding culture is the big thing. And these students they live in a culture that is uniquely different than when any of us went to Bible college.
Mm-hmm.
They live in a totally non-Christian era where the majority of people that they live next to, the city where they're going to minister to, the vast majority of that city has no church experience, doesn't go to church. So, I mean, I think that's part of it is helping them understand culture and walk through it. And also, like, not buy into, you go to a conference and the conference has this speaker that comes up and And we always have the guys speaking at conferences that have the stories of, I started a church 3 years later, it had 10,000 people. And the negative with that is everybody thinks that's them or they're failing. When in actuality, the average church in America is what, 48 people? That most of the campuses that we start at Venture, they're a slow process. They are faithful people moving into a community, seeing themselves as missionaries, understanding culture, the way that culture speaks, and acclimating themselves and really living like missionaries. And it's one person getting saved at a time. It's a process. So we'll teach them all the strategies and systems.
Yeah.
But the thing that will help them understand is what it's like to minister in 2024 culture, because we do understand that. And part of the, like, can we relate as ministers in our 50s? This is the age of all of our kids. Like all of our kids are in their 20s. So most of us would say the age demographic where our kids are at is absolutely our favorite age demographic. So we're really passionate about our kids and their friends, and it just happens to be the age of all the students that we're going to minister to.
But I've also noticed this generation of young people is more open. And I've even done some study that talks about the Gen Z relationship tends to trust adults more than their peers. And part of it is because the social media, the way they've been raised, and there can be that there. So they're looking for role models. So I think that there is that relational piece that we have, as well as I also think it's a shared learning. It's understanding that even though we may have a lot of expertise and wisdom, there are things that these students see that we're not going to see just because of the perspective of where they've grown. We never stop learning. We never stop growing. It's not like I've got a brain full of information I'm going to dump into yours. It's we're learning together, and we as professors who have the academic skills and experience as well as the practical skills and experience can come to the students, listen to them, and develop the learning community that's learning together. How can we best take this gospel of Jesus to this culture and make good disciples?
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there's that difference between knowledge and wisdom. We can get content out there, we can download things, but in the classroom, we're going to be thinking partners that walk alongside students and say, how do we apply the timeless, unchanging message of the gospel to the realities of the world today?
Yeah. So I'm going to throw you a curveball here. Something that I've been thinking about recently. There's a question that I have on the questions that I sent you about thinking about skills, capabilities, and competencies that people ministering in the middle of the 21st century will need. You know, the students in the classroom today will be pastoring in 2050 and beyond. But one of those things, and here's the curveball, is AI, right? It's a big thing in universities, especially right now, because, you know, it's like a stream of students who are writing their papers with AI and all this kind of thing. And I don't know about you guys, but when, you know, ChatGPT came out, I said, hey, ChatGPT, give me a sermon outline of John 3:16 or whatever. And you get the outline back, and it's basic, but it's not that bad, you know? And it really raises all sorts of interesting logistical and philosophical questions about ministry and what we're doing. We had a situation recently, not an academic position, but we were looking for a staff position here at the university, and someone wrote their cover letter using AI. And someone, you know, some of the team was scandalized by this. Other people were like, no, this is how people do things nowadays. So things are changing around us with the use of AI tools and technology. So I guess a question for us to think about is, how do you think AI affects ministry, and especially is going to play into the kinds of ministry skills and things that students will be doing in the classroom and then in the next 20, 30, 40 years?
Well, first off, tell us how you guys found out the person wrote their cover letter with AI. That's what I want.
Okay, one of our faculty looked at it, who, you know, academics are trained close. He's someone who's training close reading, and I guess it didn't match the resume exactly. And he fed it. There's these things called AI detectors, and you can feed it through them online, and it came back with a pretty high likelihood that it was AI. You know, so I think what some people are doing today is they have their resume and they just feed it into the AI and are like, write me a cover letter. And it writes them a cover letter. So But that was how that happened.
School
Yeah.
so much easier back in the day.
Well,
No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
I think I have a couple thoughts with
Uh-huh.
this. First off, I think that technology can be used for ministry.
Mhm.
It really can. One of the things that we're trying to figure out at Venture, in fact, we have our media team is going to a big conference this fall in Dallas to become experts in AI.
Mm-hmm.
And what it can do is it can take my sermon video and literally sync up in my sermon, my lips, and so it looks like I'm speaking it in 50 different languages, and we can broadcast that online. So there are amazing strengths to AI. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
AI is going to allow everybody to have multi-ethnic campuses, services with minimal resources. And by the way, it does this in 5 minutes. And
Wow.
AI, like I have a podcast, and AI does all of our reels and edits our YouTube podcast in 5 minutes, like flawlessly. So there are blessings to it.
Yeah.
I do think like what's going to happen with the students that want to cheat on their sermon prep and things.
Yeah.
What AI does not have is what we as Pentecostals and charismatics have, which is the Holy Spirit, which is the anointing. It is not spirit filled. It is not anointed. And like, as Alan mentioned, I mean, Gen Z, there's just something that's different about this generation. They're hungry for things of the spiritual, and they're going to be able to tell. They're going to be able to tell when a message is anointed and thought through and is done the work in the heart of the minister, when it's spirit filled. They won't fall for it. So that's part of what you help people realize, is that when you prepare these things and write sermons, this is a spiritual experience, that out of it comes this spirit-filled encounter with Jesus and a potential new level of anointing for you when you minister, and you don't want to miss out on that. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I think along with that is AI can be a tool that can help us use our time better on the things that really matter. It feels like it's a threat, and it will be a job threat. I mean, there are jobs that won't be around anymore, but this isn't the first time this has happened. I mean, think about all this stuff that was lost when we shift from horses to automobiles, or when people started using telephones and we shift to smartphones. It's always there, and somehow the economies have adapted. And if, say, we're going to shun it and keep away from it, it's wrong. Instead, we need to say, how can we best equip students to use this? And I know as every university is, okay, do we say you cannot use AI at all, or does it need to be moderated? AI cannot replace a demonstration of your own learning. So how do we do that? Same thing in ministry. And we've been translating the sermons since January, and it's been much appreciated by people to be able to see, because we do have people from so many different languages for whom that's a way we can share the gospel. But is there more? Is there more that we can do? I have found, like even this week, doing some research for my sermon on Sunday, I found some of the stuff ChatGPT was coming out with. Yeah, that's not quite right. And went out and did another research, and it's like, okay, it can be good, but it's still not foolproof yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me that Jesus said that we should be innocent, right? Wise as serpents, innocent as doves, right? That whole concept. And one of our distinctives as a university and as ministers is that we are Pentecostal. We are spirit-led. And so I think that the spirit-led strategy can actually go hand in hand, that we can be spirit-led and use the tools like AI today to accomplish the Great Commission and bring the hope of Jesus to the world.
Yeah. Your answers are pretty encouraging to me. I tend to be pretty technology forward, so I feel some of the same cautions that you do, but I certainly don't want to just shut it down, because this feels like a bad idea, because this is the future, and it's there's new things every day. Okay, another thing, a connected thing to think about, thinking about the future, obviously in 20, 25 years, when, we'll be retirement age, or apparently running for president. Sorry, too soon.
That'll be Beth.
Yeah.
I'm voting for Beth.
Yeah. Bacchus 2040 or whatever it will be. What are some other things that you see emerging in the next 25, 30 years that you think your students in the classroom, even this fall, are going to have to be dealing with some skills and capabilities that they'll need that maybe are different than what you've had to have in your career so far.
I think
Wow.
of the need for courageous innovators. Think about this.
Okay.
David was the youngest brother,
Mm-hmm.
and when the whole Goliath problem came, nobody else thought of, hey, just let's take some, let's go in faith and take a few stones and take this guy out. It was
Yeah.
David that had that courageous, innovative
Mm-hmm.
idea, and I think we were kind of taught that this is how you do it, and this is
Mm-hmm.
how it's been done. But the next generation, we need courageous, faith-filled innovators.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things we have to help students in the future, especially as America gets more and more secular,
Mm-hmm.
and that's inevitable. And you're gonna have we are entering into a full-on world where the majority of the world does not agree with us, does not agree with our values, the way we view things, and it's just going to get more intense in 25 years. So they
Mm-hmm.
need to be ready for that. And I think like
Mhm.
I'm doing a funeral tomorrow, um, and I'm describing this guy, and I'm thinking the thing about him, the character trait that I appreciate is his tenacity, his faithfulness, and his loyalty, and those are misunderstood character qualities today, and almost uh, disrespected
Yeah.
qualities today. And that is the types of character traits that students are going to need if they're going to survive in ministry 25 years from now. It is going to take some immense courage, tenacity to stick with what they're going to be facing in culture. And then I think another key thing that we need to help people with is that being bivocational in ministry is not second rate ministry.
Hmm.
I think there's going to be less and less full time vocational ministers and more people that are going to be bivocational.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to be able to view that as fulfilling the call that God gave to them just as much as if they got a quote unquote full time
Mm-hmm.
paycheck for the church, because of the fact that it's getting more and more expensive to do ministry. And so, especially in the areas like where we're all at, we can have less ministers and pay them full time, or we can have a lot of part time ministers. And
Mm-hmm.
we have to help them realize that it's not second rate ministry, but it's effective frontline ministry, being able to do it, be bivocational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, discernment and wisdom are always going to be key. Discerning the
Yeah.
voice of the Holy Spirit, as well as discerning culture and the wisdom to know what should we do. How do we recognize what's happening and the things we can't even guess what people are going to be dealing with in 2050. We're wrestling with some huge ethical questions that our culture has made a dramatic shift, a 180 shift on saying
Yeah.
what used to be considered wrong is now not even right, but you absolutely must endorse and celebrate this. And our students are being squeezed between this, the whatever voices of the church and scriptured history, again, with this pressure from culture. So we've got to be able to help equip students to answer the questions of today. And it's not so much giving them the answers for the issues they're dealing with today, but teaching them how to discover answers for those questions we can't even dream they're going to have to answer
Yeah.
in 25 years.
And
Yeah.
I do think like a key thing is I have seen over the last maybe 15, 20 years, people that are Christians that go through Bible college and things are way more biblically illiterate than
Hmm.
we were back in the day. And people need a really strong foundation in the gospel. They need to know what the Bible says
Mm-hmm.
when they face these cultural issues. So there's got to be an understanding of what are dogmatic, timeless truths that we know from God's word, that aren't just traditions
Mm-hmm.
passed down by maybe the church that they grew up in or by their parents, but what does the Bible say and how does the Bible address this? And I think if we raise up biblically knowledgeable graduates and
Yeah.
ministers, they'll have confidence when they face cultural issues that are directly opposed to what Scripture says.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things I've been thinking about, we've all been thinking about in the last, especially 10 or 15 years, it seems like, just this last week, we had another major significant pastor in our country, a revelation of a serious issue. You can Google things and find them, people. But I think we've all been more aware of, and our students probably will need to be particularly aware of, the whatever the situation was where we just swept things under the rug and didn't talk about it and let it go. No, that is bad for victims. That is bad for the church. That is bad for the cause of Christ. It's bad all around. And that's another example. Even as recently maybe as 15, 20 years ago, generally churches would be like, oh, we don't want to make a big deal about this. Just keep it quiet and don't just pass it on. And that's shown from everywhere from the Catholic Church to the Southern Baptist and elsewhere, not to be, and we're not, in some ways, God is not immune to this either. That's shown to be a problem. So anyway, just a thought there I've had this last week or so. So the classes you'll be teaching this fall, Brandon, you and Di will be co-teaching Preaching 1, and then Brandon, you'll be teaching Ministry Leadership and Administration for us. Beth, you're teaching Pastoral Care and Counseling, and Alan, you'll be teaching Ministry, Life, and Calling. I'm hoping, and I'm going to really encourage our students to listen to this podcast, but obviously there's a course description in the catalog for these courses, but when you think about these courses that you're going to be bringing to the table to the students this fall, what would you describe the heart of those courses? So Beth, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think right now when you think of ministry training, a lot of times there's an emphasis on showing up with content, being a great communicator, all of the things that happen from the platform. However, when people show up at our churches, they can download, like we were saying, content anywhere. They can listen to the best of the best pastors today. People show up at our churches to be pastored. They want someone to invest in their life. They want community. They want relationship. They want somebody to talk about, what do I do in this particular challenge that I'm having. So we're going to be really wrestling with, what does it mean, and what are the skill sets? And that is a skill set. What are the skill sets that we can learn so that we can truly pastor people when they show up? And people show up with big problems and complicated problems. So it's going to be a fun course that really wrestles with the realities of, hey, what do I do when the messes of people's messy lives come to my church? How do I invest and walk alongside of people in pastoral care and counseling?
Okay, great. Brandon.
Yeah, my two classes are very practical ministry classes. That if in the preaching class, what we hope is that Di and I will teach them strategies for preaching that 25 years from now, they'll still be using. These will be notes that they'll still be going back to. And then in the ministry, leadership, and administration class, what my goal there is, and again, I'm thinking that most of my students, like, I don't know why you would do that class if you're not a ministry graduate, ministry student. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that or not, because you might want more students in there. But my goal is that they have hands-on, practical, here's what I'm going to do my first 2 years of ministry. So when I started ministry, my first day in that office, I have a roadmap that helps me implement things, that I know what structures to create, what systems to implement, and I know a proven, simple process to do this at my church, with my youth ministry, children's ministry, whatever it is. So that's really what my goal is to give them hands-on tools that will help them succeed immediately when they step into ministry.
Okay. Alan.
Great. Yeah, I got Ministry, Life, and Calling. Wonderful class about you as the minister. How do you know you're called to ministry? And what's different about ministry than any other career you might do? How do you manage that career? Things like finding a job, doing an interview. How do you serve as a staff pastor? How do you make good decisions? How do you have your own spiritual life in order?
Yeah.
How do you have a good ministry family, marriage, manage your personal finances? All those kind of things. So it's super practical, super This is how ministry happens. We'll also do a little bit on some of the basic skills of ministry. This class is required for all college and ministry students. There are some others like theology, ministry essentials that'll go more into depth, but we'll talk a little bit about how to do weddings and funerals and water baptism, communion, worship, all those kind of elements there. So that class covers a lot, and we'll bring in a lot of guests for that class as well. And as well as internship, we'll meet once a week, but the main goal of internship is to get you serving someplace where you are making a difference. I already had several students reach out who are wanting to do something different, and that's okay as long as it is real ministry with people, and you've got somebody who can serve as a supervisor, who can give us feedback saying, yep, this student's really doing it well, and finding a place to serve. And let me just say, a lot of times where you serve as an intern may end up helping you find your long-term place of service as well. So we've already had some churches come out and say, hey, we'll pay you if you're willing to drive to us and come and serve. So looking forward to that, and both of those just helping equip you to do what God has called you to do.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Sorry, I forgot to mention internship there, that you'll be doing this fall as well. Alan, I know you told me that Ministry Life and Calling for you is really signature class. It's a class you taught, I think, a number of times, and something you're pretty excited about for this fall. So
yeah, in fact, when I was full-time at Northwest, very first class ever taught, 8 a.m. on Tuesday, Thursday, and what's so fun is to just see some of those students who are in that classroom now serving as pastors at churches around the country, serving in a lot of different areas, and that was a long time ago, so it's great.
Yeah. So as we're coming to a close here, maybe just one or two more questions. If we're probably going to have this episode out in early August, so a few weeks at least, or a month before the semester starts. If students in your classes, they don't know you except maybe from this podcast, how would you recommend students get ready for the kind of class that you're going to be bringing? What should they do to be prepared and ready to learn from Professor Backes, Professor Beals, and Professor Ehler? Alan, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Get your work done on time. Show up to class and be ready to engage. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It doesn't make sense. Raise your hand. Speak up. Be ready to share. Put it into practice. And the goal of the class, especially Ministry Life and Calling, is live it out. I'm going to make you do things in this class that should hopefully help you develop lifelong habits. They're going to help you follow Jesus and serve and finish well, completing that ministry calling.
Yeah. Beth?
Two things. Read the assignments, because you got to get some new knowledge. You got to get some new knowledge in there if we're going to wrestle with it. And number two, get ready for a significant learning experience. My doctorate is in educational leadership. So part of my sweet spot is creating significant learning experiences with hands-on projects, group projects as well. We're not just going to sit around, and it's not going to be a talking head experience. You're going to have some hands-on practical experiences that help you develop the skill sets that we're talking about in the classroom so that you can apply them in the real world.
Okay, thanks, Beth.
Yeah, I think helping the students understand that we don't have to do this. That it's not like we're getting paid super well to do this. No offense.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
We're doing this because we believe in the next generation. So we have other jobs that are paying our bills. So we are doing this because we believe in you and we want to help you. And so I'd say, from my standpoint, showing me value is going to help you win as a student. How do you show me value? Show up to class on time, show up to class, do your assignments, turn them in on time. Because my time is super valuable, and I'm investing my time in you because I believe in you. And I think we would all agree, like, we're not looking to be incredibly hard graders. We're not looking to make the classes so difficult that students don't want to do it. We want to make this a really enjoyable experience, but we also want it to be enjoyable for us. And it will be enjoyable for us if we know that the students are focused on their academics, but they're also, probably more than anything, focused on their calling to eventually be a minister. So I would say that's just a little bit about me. I value being on time.
So students, you are hearing some consistent things from our professors here. So keep this in mind. Time's just about up. Maybe there's something you wanted to share today, and maybe a question I didn't ask. Any final thought that you'd like to end with today?
Ministry isn't easy, but it's incredible. And just know there's a price that comes with it, but it's beyond compare. And the opportunity to make a difference for eternity in the lives of other people, even when it gets tough. And there will be people who hurt you and disappoint you, and even in college you may experience that. And why am I willing to put up with this? Because I know eternity will be different for people because I said yes to Jesus when he called me.
Yeah.
At Venture, we have this creed that we use, and we say Jesus is the hope of the world. The gospel changes lives, and the church, through all of its imperfections, is the agency that God chose to use to tell the world this message. And the world needs Jesus. It's always needed Jesus, but really needs Jesus now. And I'm excited about ministry right now. Yeah. I'm excited about what I believe God is going to do, specifically what God is going to do in our state, in our region. And they get to be a key part of it. And I think it's really exciting times to be a minister and to be somebody excited about being a minister in the years to come.
Yeah. Beth, we'll give you the final word.
When young people answer the call of God on their lives, really you're choosing a meaningful faith journey opposed to a mundane lifestyle. And you have to take the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes with that. And like Alan said, it's messy, but you're going to see miracles. And it's the 20-somethings that are helping lead our church plant, and they're killing it. And so I believe that the future of the church, there's a lot of negativity about not only this generation, but the future of the church. I believe that our best days are ahead of us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, thanks to each of the three of you, not only for this conversation today, but for what we're going to be doing this fall in just a few months. Looking forward to that. People may be listening who are students. People may be listening outside. If people are interested in learning more about the ministry you're engaged in or learning more about you, where can they find you on the internet? Website, social media, whatever you might have. Beth, where can people reach you if they'd like to?
Sure. On Insta, I'm simply Beth Backes, the number one. Beth Backes on Facebook. TheTableChurch.live is our church website. You can find out all information and see our messages there as well.
Okay. Alan, how about you?
bnc.org for Bellevue Neighborhood Church.
Okay. And you the author of a recent book as well.
Yeah, How to Make Big Decisions Wisely. You'll have to read it when you take Ministry, Life, and Calling. So.
Okay. Brandon?
Instagram, Twitter for me is Fight Pastor, FIGHT Pastor. I have a podcast that I do called Pastors Unfiltered, which you can find on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. My church's website is ourventure.church.
Great. Awesome. And Brandon, a special thank you to you. I know you're on sabbatical right now, so thanks so much for joining us while you're on sabbatical this summer. And so if you go on that podcast or look at the sermons, you don't see any from him recently, that's because he's on sabbatical, but he'll be back in August.
In a month.
Yeah, back in a month. Great. Well, again, thank you to the three of you, and look forward to talking to you in the next few months and certainly having you on faculty with us this fall.
Right.
All right. I'm glad we pulled this off the third time.
We did it.